Enslavement. In the opulent halls of Emperor Xolthan's palace, Zara, a human slave, hurried to complete her tasks before the day's end. Her calloused hands deftly manipulated the advanced alien technology that had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat over the long years of servitude. Zara's life had been a bleak tapestry woven from endless labor, meager rations, and the constant threat of punishment. Yet even in the darkest moments, a flicker of defiance burned steadily in her heart, a refusal to fully submit to her alien overlords. As she worked, Zara overheard snatches of conversation drifting from a nearby chamber. Two of Xolthan's high-ranking officials were deep in discussion, their voices low but urgent. The Emperor grows impatient. When will the fleet be ready to move on Earth? Soon. Their primitive defenses will be no match for our superior technology. We will crush them swiftly and add their pitiful rock to the Empire. Zara's blood ran cold. Earth, her distant ancestral home, was in danger. Though she had never set foot on its soil, Zara felt a sudden fierce protectiveness surge through her. She couldn't let her people suffer the same fate as she had, a life of subjugation under the cruel yoke of Emperor Xolthan. In that moment, a spark ignited in Zara's soul, burning away the years of fear and resignation. She would find a way to escape, to reach Earth and warn them of the coming invasion. No matter the cost, she would not let another world fall to Xolthan's insatiable hunger for conquest. As the twin moons rose over the palace that night, Zara lay in her hard, narrow bunk, her mind racing as she began to formulate a desperate plan. She knew every inch of the palace, every guard rotation and security protocol. It would be almost impossible, but she had to try. For Earth, for freedom, for the chance at a life beyond the chains of slavery. Sleep eluded her as Zara mentally laid the groundwork for her escape. She would need to gather supplies, study ship schematics, and choose the perfect moment to make her move. The risks were enormous. Failure would mean torture and execution. But the alternative, remaining a passive cog in Xolthan's machine of conquest, was no longer an option. As the first pale light of dawn crept across the palace walls, Zara rose to begin another day of servitude. But now, a new purpose burned in her heart, a secret fire that no amount of hardship could extinguish. She would bide her time, play the obedient slave, all while quietly setting the wheels of her audacious plan in motion. Unbeknownst to her captors, a revolution was brewing in their midst, embodied in one fierce, determined human. Zara, the unassuming palace slave, would soon become the spark that ignited an inferno of resistance across the stars. And Emperor Xolthan, secure in his galactic dominion, had no inkling of the storm that was about to break upon his empire's shores. In the days and weeks that followed, Zara threw herself into her preparations with a fervor born of desperation and newfound purpose. Every stolen moment was spent memorizing guard schedules, duplicating access codes, and squirreling away precious supplies. The work was painstaking and perilous, each small act of defiance risking exposure and brutal retribution. But Zara pressed on, fueled by visions of a free Earth and the chance for a life beyond the confines of slavery. As her plan took shape, Zara dared to nourish the seedling of hope that had taken root in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, she could pull this off. Maybe she could be more than a powerless pawn in Xolthan's galactic chess game. One fateful night, when the moons hung low and the palace halls lay silent, Zara knew the time had come. With her heart pounding and her meager possessions strapped to her back, she slipped from her quarters and melted into the shadows. Every step was a battle against the urge to freeze or flee back to the illusory safety of her bunk. But Zara pushed forward, her feet guided by the map she had painstakingly etched into her memory. She crept through deserted corridors, ducked behind pillars to avoid patrolling sentries, and held her breath as she punched stolen codes into access panels with shaking hands. Deeper and deeper into the palace's bowels she delved, until at last she reached the hangar bay where the spacecraft were housed. Stealing aboard a small courier vessel, Zara's nimble fingers flew over the unfamiliar controls, her mind desperately grasping for every scrap of piloting knowledge she had gleaned from overheard conversations and illicit peeks at flight manuals. With a lurch and a whine of engines, the craft lifted from its berth, slipping out into the night sky like a silver fish darting from a shattered pool. Zara's heart soared even as her hands trembled on the controls. She had done it. She was free. But her elation was short-lived. As the ship cleared the palace's outer perimeter, alarms blared to life, bright beams of light scything through the darkness to fix on her fleeing vessel. Gritting her teeth, Zara pushed the unfamiliar craft to its limits, jinxing and dodging as palace defenses unleashed a hail of laser fire. Her world narrowed to the glowing redouts, the bucking of the ship, the searing brightness of narrowly avoided blasts. Tears blurred her vision as Zara fought to remember every scrap of astronavigation she had overheard, every whispered rumor of secret trade routes and hidden jump points. Desperately, she laid in a course for the distant speck of light she prayed was Earth's sun, her hands white-knuckled on the controls as she willed the stars to blur and stretch into the impossible colors of hyperspace. Just as a particularly well-aimed shot grazed her hull and sent the ship spinning sidewise, the cosmos folded around her, and the mottled black of real space gave way to the swirling chaos of faster-than-light travel. Zara sagged back in the pilot's seat, every muscle trembling with spent adrenaline. She had done it. Against all odds, she had escaped the Tyrant's grasp and set course for the birthplace of humanity. But the journey was far from over, and the task ahead loomed even more impossible than her flight from captivity. Somehow, she must reach Earth and find a way to warn its people of the coming storm. As the ship hurtled through the secret byways of the cosmos, carrying its lone human passenger toward an uncertain future, Zara steeled herself for the trials ahead. She had lived as property, survived by her wits and determination in the palace of a merciless emperor. Those same qualities, she vowed, would see her through the dark days to come. For now, she flew, a single spark of resistance arcing across the cold and endless night. Escape. The stolen spacecraft hurtled through the swirling vortex of hyperspace, its lone occupant gripping the controls with white-knuckled intensity. Zara's heart raced as she watched the readouts, praying that the untested modifications she'd made to the ship's drive would hold together long enough to reach her destination. Days turned to weeks as Zara navigated the secret paths between stars, skirting the well-traveled routes patrolled by Xorthan's forces. She subsisted on meager rations and snatched fitful periods of sleep, always alert for the telltale signs of pursuit or the sudden emergence of an enemy vessel. But even as the physical strain took its toll, Zara's mind buzzed with plans and possibilities. She pored over the ship's databanks, devouring every scrap of information on Earth and its inhabitants. The more she learned, the more her resolve hardened. She would find a way to warn them, to help them prepare for the coming onslaught. As she drew closer to her destination, Zara began to pick up fragments of Terran broadcasts, snippets of music, news reports, even entertainment programs. She marveled at the diversity and vibrancy of human culture, so different from the regimented austerity of life under Xorthan's rule. It only strengthened her determination to protect this precious, fragile world. Finally, after a harrowing journey fraught with close calls and narrow escapes, Earth's azure sphere filled her view screen. Zara's heart leaped at the sight of humanity's cradle, even as apprehension coiled in her gut. She had made it this far, now came the true test. Engaging the ship's cloaking system, Zara slipped into Earth's atmosphere undetected, her craft shielded from the primitive scanners of the planet's orbital defenses. She had studied maps of the surface extensively, seeking the perfect place to make landfall, somewhere remote enough to avoid immediate detection, but close enough to population centers to begin her mission. As she descended through layers of cloud and air, Zara couldn't help but marvel at the planet's raw beauty. Vast oceans glittered beneath swirls of white, green expanses of forest and grassland stretched to the horizons, and soaring mountain ranges cast jagged shadows across the land. It was a world alive, pulsing with a richness and variety she had never known in the sterile halls of Xorthan's palace. Zara guided her ship toward a sprawling wilderness, a rugged landscape of towering pines and plunging river gorges. As she prepared for landing, a sudden alarm blared through the cockpit. The cloaking system, strained by the long journey and the passage through Earth's atmosphere, had failed. Her ship was now visible to any watching eyes. Cursing under her breath, Zara scanned the area for a suitable landing spot. She had to get the ship down quickly, before any Terran authorities could investigate the sudden appearance of an unknown craft in their skies. A small clearing in the forest caught her eye, and Zara angled the ship towards it, fingers flying over the controls as she initiated the landing sequence. The spacecraft bucked and shuddered as it descended, its damaged systems struggling to compensate for the planet's gravitational pull. Trees whipped past the view screen in a blur of green, and the ground rushed up to meet her. With a bone-jarring impact, the ship slammed into the earth, plowing a deep furrow into the loamy soil before finally shuddering to a halt. Zara was flung forward in her harness, the breath driven from her lungs by the force of the crash. For a long moment, she hung there, dazed and disoriented, the acrid scent of burned insulation filling her nostrils. Slowly, painfully, she extricated herself from the restraints, her body a mass of bruises and aching muscles. The ship's interior was a ruin, consoles sparking and panels hanging drunkenly from the walls. But she had made it. She was alive and on the surface of Earth. Stumbling to the hatch, Zara forced it open with a screech of protesting metal. Sunlight streamed into the battered craft, along with a gust of cool, pine-scented air. Blinking against the brightness, Zara staggered out onto the alien soil, her boots sinking into the rich loam. She had barely taken a dozen steps before her injuries caught up with her. The world spun sickeningly, and a wave of darkness crashed over her. Zara's knees buckled, and she pitched forward, her body crumpling to the forest floor as consciousness fled. As she lay there, broken and bleeding amid the wreckage of her ship, Zara clung to a single desperate thought. She had made it to Earth. Now the true fight would begin. The fight to save a world that didn't even know it was in danger. The fight to forge a new life from the ashes of her old one. Darkness claimed her, but even in the void of unconsciousness, Zara's spirit blazed undiminished. She had escaped the chains of slavery, had crossed the vast gulf of space to reach this moment. Whatever trials lay ahead, she would meet them with the same fierce determination that had carried her this far. For she was Zara, the woman who had defied an emperor and stolen the stars in the name of freedom. And on this strange, beautiful world, she would find a way to rise again. The story will continue to unfold as Zara encounters Ethan, the kind-hearted mechanic who takes her in and becomes her unlikely ally in the fight against Emperor Xorthan. Together, they will forge an unbreakable bond as they work to warn Earth and prepare for the coming invasion. Zara's indomitable spirit and unique skills, combined with Ethan's compassion and down-to-earth ingenuity, will form the core of a resistance movement that will change the fate of two worlds. Through their shared trials and triumphs, a deep connection will blossom, offering both a chance at a brighter future they never dared imagine. The stage is now set for an epic tale of resilience, hope, and the unshakable power of the human spirit. Stay tuned for the next riveting chapter in Zara and Ethan's story, Encounter. The sun was just beginning to crest the horizon when Ethan Reeves set out for his usual morning hike. The crisp mountain air filled his lungs as he trekked through the familiar trails, his boots crunching softly on the pine needle-strewn path. For Ethan, these early morning excursions were a cherished ritual, a chance to clear his head and prepare for the day ahead. As the owner of the small town's only auto repair shop, his days were often long and hectic, filled with oil changes, engine rebuilds, and the endless paperwork that came with running a business. But out here, amid the towering evergreens and the gentle murmur of the river, Ethan found a measure of peace and solitude that was hard to come by in the bustle of town life. It was a time to reflect, to plan, and sometimes just to marvel at the rugged beauty of the landscape he called home. As he rounded a bend in the trail, something caught Ethan's eye, a glint of metal through the trees, out of place in the sea of green and brown. Frowning, he veered off the path, pushing through the undergrowth towards the anomaly. What he found stopped him dead in his tracks. There, in a small clearing, lay the wreckage of some kind of aircraft, its sleek lines and strange materials unlike anything he had ever seen. The craft had ploughed a deep gorge into the earth, and bits of debris were scattered across the forest floor. Heart-pounding, Ethan approached cautiously, his mind spinning with questions and possibilities. Could this be some kind of experimental military plane? A secret government project on Ori? Or something else entirely? As he drew closer, he spotted a figure lying crumpled beside the ruined vessel. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. It was a woman, her slim form clad in some kind of form-fitting jumpsuit. And she was clearly injured, her clothing torn and stained with blood. Ethan rushed to her side, his hiking boots skidding on the loose soil. Up close, he could see that the woman was unconscious, her face pale and bruised. A nasty gash marred her forehead, and her dark hair was matted with blood. But what struck Ethan most was her appearance. The woman's features were undeniably human, but her skin had a faint, iridescent sheen to it, like mother of pearl. And when he gently brushed her hair back to check her pulse, he noticed small, intricate patterns etched into her skin, almost like circuitry. Ethan's mind reeled as he tried to process what he was seeing. This was no ordinary plane crash, and this was no ordinary woman. But speculations would have to wait. Right now, she needed help, and fast. With gentle hands, Ethan gathered the injured woman into his arms, marveling at her feather-light weight. He carefully picked his way back to the trail, his mind racing as he planned his next moves. He couldn't take her to the hospital. Too many questions would be asked, questions he had no answers for, and something told him that this woman's presence needed to be kept secret, at least for now. That left only one option: Ethan's cabin, a small rustic structure nestled in the woods a few miles outside of town. It was off the grid, with its own generator and water supply. The perfect place to lay low and heal up, away from prying eyes. As he hiked back towards his parked jeep, the mysterious woman cradled against his chest, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a sharp turn into uncharted territory. Who was this strange visitor, and what had brought her crashing into his world? Little did he know, as he carefully settled his unexpected passenger into the vehicle and set off down the winding mountain road, that the answers to those questions would change the course of his life, and the fate of his planet forever. In the days that followed, Ethan devoted himself to nursing the injured woman, whom he had begun to call Zara, based on a faint muttering during one of her fevered dreams, back to health. He cleaned and dressed her wounds, made sure she stayed hydrated, and watched over her as she slept. It was during one of these long vigils, as Ethan sat by Zara's bedside in the cozy warmth of the cabin, that she finally awoke. Her eyes, a startling shade of violet, fluttered open, widening in confusion and fear as they darted around the unfamiliar surroundings. "Easy, easy," Ethan soothed, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "You're safe. I found you in the woods, beside your crashed ship. I brought you here to recover." Zara struggled to sit up, wincing as the movement pulled at her injuries. Ethan gently helped her, propping pillows behind her back. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. "What planet is this?" Ethan blinked, taken aback by the question. "You're on Earth," he said slowly. "In the Rocky Mountains, to be specific." At his words, Zara's eyes widened, a mix of relief and urgency flooding her features. "Earth," she breathed. "I made it, but there's no time to lose. I have to warn you, all of you, you're in terrible danger." Over the next hours, as Ethan listened in growing astonishment, Zara unfolded her incredible story. She spoke of her life as a slave in Emperor Xoltham's palace, of the overheard plot to invade Earth, of her desperate escape and harrowing journey across the stars. Ethan's mind reeled as he tried to process the enormity of what he was hearing. Aliens, advanced technology, a coming invasion. It was like something out of a science fiction novel. But looking into Zara's haunted eyes, seeing the deadly earnest conviction in her every word, he knew she was telling the truth. "We have to do something," Zara finished, her hands twisting in the blankets. Sorthan's forces are vast and powerful. Earth's defenses won't stand a chance, not as they are now. But with the knowledge I have, the technology I can share, maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to fight back. Ethan was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant as he grappled with the immensity of the task before them. Then, slowly, he reached out and covered Zara's hand with his own, his calloused palm warm and reassuring against her skin. "Whatever it takes," he said quietly, his voice filled with a steely determination that surprised even him. "Whatever we have to do, we'll find a way. Together. Earth is my home, and I won't let some alien tyrant take it without a fight." In that moment, as Zara's fingers curled around his in a grip that spoke of desperation and budding hope, an unbreakable bond was forged. Two unlikely allies, thrown together by the twisted currents of fate, united in a common cause that would shape the destiny of worlds. The battle for Earth had begun, and in a small, hidden cabin nestled deep in the mountains, the first seeds of resistance had been sown. From these humble beginnings, a force would rise to shake the very stars, a force born of courage, determination, and the indomitable power of the human spirit. Preparation. In the weeks that followed Zara's revelation, the small cabin in the woods became a hive of frenetic activity. Ethan and Zara worked tirelessly, driven by a shared sense of urgency and purpose. They knew that time was short and that the fate of Earth hung in the balance. Zara, her injuries healing rapidly thanks to her alien physiology and Ethan's diligent care, threw herself into the task of repairing her damaged ship. The advanced technology was far beyond anything Ethan had ever seen, but he proved to be a quick study, his natural mechanical aptitude allowing him to grasp the foreign concepts and systems with astonishing speed. Together, they cannibalized parts from Ethan's workshop and the wreckage of Zara's escape pod, jury-reading repairs and modifications with a combination of human ingenuity and alien know-how. Slowly but surely, the spacecraft began to take shape once more, a patchwork of gleaming alloy and rough-hewn steel, a testament to the unlikely alliance forged in the face of annihilation. But the ship was only part of the equation. Zara knew that to have any hope of standing against Sorthan's forces, Earth would need more than just advanced technology. It would need warriors, men and women trained to use that technology to fight with the skill and ferocity of the Emperor's elite soldiers. And so, even as they worked to repair the ship, Zara began to train Ethan in the ways of alien combat. In the quiet clearing behind the cabin, the sounds of physical exertion and the hum of energy weapons soon became a familiar melody, an incongruous counterpoint to the natural symphony of birdsong and wind-rustled leaves. Under Zara's tutelage, Ethan learned to move with a new grace and economy of motion, his human strength and reflexes honed to a razor's edge. He drilled in the use of the alien weapons they cobbled together from scavenged parts, until the once foreign devices felt like natural extensions of his body. But it wasn't just physical training. Zara also shared with Ethan the secrets of Sorthan's tactics and strategies, the weaknesses in their seemingly invincible armor. Together, they pored over holographic star maps and battle plans, plotting and scheming, seeking any advantage they could find in the coming fight. As the days turned to weeks, a transformation came over both of them. Ethan, once a simple mechanic, now moved with the lethal assurance of a seasoned warrior. And Zara, the hardened survivor, found herself softening in ways she had never thought possible, her icy reserve thawing in the warmth of Ethan's unwavering support and compassion. In the quiet moments between training sessions and repair work, they talked about their pasts, their hopes and fears, the worlds that had shaped them. Zara spoke of the beauty and wonders she had glimpsed in her service to the Emperor, the myriad species and cultures she had encountered. Ethan shared stories of his childhood in these very mountains, of the close-knit community that had raised him, the quiet dreams he had nurtured in the greasy confines of his small-town garage. Slowly, almost without realizing it, they began to open up to each other, to forge a connection that went beyond mere alliance or friendship. It was a bond born of shared struggle and sacrifice, of the knowledge that they might well be the only thing standing between their worlds and total destruction. And as that bond deepened, so too did their resolve. They knew that they could not do this alone, that they would need help if they were to have any chance of success. And so, with careful planning and no small amount of trepidation, they began to reach out to others, to gather a select group of trusted allies. There was Jenna, Ethan's childhood friend and the local sheriff, whose quick mind and steady hand would be invaluable in the battles to come. And Michael, the eccentric scientist who had long been an outcast in the town, but whose brilliant mind and unorthodox thinking might just hold the key to victory. One by one, Ethan and Zara brought them into the fold, sharing the truth of the coming invasion and the desperate plan they had hatched. And one by one, these unlikely heroes pledged themselves to the cause, driven by love for their world and a fierce determination to protect all they held dear. In the hidden base camp they established deep in the mountains, this ragtag band of resistance fighters trained and planned, forging themselves into a weapon that might just have a chance of turning the tide. They knew the odds were stacked against them, that they were hopelessly outgunned and outmatched. But they also knew that they had something the Emperor and his legions could never understand: the indomitable power of the human spirit, the refusal to submit or surrender, even in the face of overwhelming odds. And so they prepared, these unlikely warriors, this band of misfits and dreamers. They readied themselves for the fight of their lives, for the battle that would decide the fate of their world. And at the heart of it all, driving them forward with the fire of shared purpose and unbreakable bond, were Ethan and Zara, the mechanic and the alien slave, the two souls who had found in each other the strength to stand against the oncoming storm. The stage was set, the pieces were in motion, and as the first ominous signs of the impending invasion began to appear in the skies above, this small band of heroes stood ready to meet their destiny head-on. They would fight, and they would win, or they would die trying. For in the end, that was all they could do, all anyone could do when faced with the forces of tyranny and oppression. Stand up, stand together, and fight for the freedom and future of all they held dear, no matter the cost. Invasion. The day the invasion began started like any other, the sun rising over the mountain peaks in a spectacular display of pinks and golds. But the tranquil beauty of the dawn belied the tension that thrummed through the resistance camp, the sense of impending cataclysm that hung heavy in the air. They had known it was coming, had seen the signs in the increasingly frenzied activity of the world's militaries, the strange lights and anomalies that danced across the night sky. But still, when the alarm sounded, when Zara's cobbled-together sensors lit up with the unmistakable signatures of incoming ships, it hit them like a physical blow. This was it, the moment they had been training for, the day they had all known was coming but had secretly hoped would never arrive, the day they would be put to the ultimate test, the day they would find out if all their preparation, all their sacrifice had been enough. Ethan felt a strange sense of calm descend over him as he suited up in the hybrid armor they had crafted, a fusion of human Kevlar and alien alloys. Beside him, Zara was a picture of focused intensity, her every movement precise and economical as she armed herself with an array of advanced weapons. Around them, the rest of the resistance fighters were doing the same, checking and double-checking their gear, exchanging terse nods and tight smiles. They were afraid. Ethan could see it in their eyes, in the slight tremor of their hands. But they were also determined, resolved to fight to their last breath for the world they loved. "Remember the plan," Zara said, her voice cutting through the tense hum of activity. "We draw their fire, buy time for the evacuations. We make them pay for every inch of ground they try to take." Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. It was a desperate strategy, a last-ditch effort to slow the inexorable advance of Sultan's legions, but it was the only one they had. The first wave hit with a fury that shook the very earth beneath their feet. Massive ships, bristling with weapons and shielding, descended from the sky like vengeful gods. The resistance fighters scrambled to their positions, manning the jury-rigged defenses they had spent weeks preparing. And then, with a roar of unleashed energy and a blinding flash of light, the battle was joined. It was a fight unlike anything Ethan had ever experienced, a chaotic maelstrom of fire and fury. The air crackled with the discharge of energy weapons, the ground shook with the impact of explosions. All around him, his friends, his comrades, fought with a fierce, desperate valor, throwing themselves against the onslaught with everything they had. Beside him, Zara was a whirlwind of death, her alien weapons cutting swaths through the advancing hordes. She moved with a speed and grace that seemed almost inhuman, dancing through the chaos like a deadly wind. But even amidst the never-ending demands of their new roles, they never lost sight of what truly mattered. They made time for each other, for the simple joys and quiet moments that had become so precious in a universe fraught with danger. They talked of the future, of the life they wanted to build together, of the children they hoped to raise, the home they dreamed of creating. A home not just for themselves, but for all those who had been displaced and uprooted by the chaos of war. And sometimes in the stillness of the night, they would simply hold each other close, marveling at the improbable journey that had brought them to this moment. The mechanic and the alien slave, two lost souls who had found in each other the strength to change the course of history. They knew that the road ahead would not be easy. They knew that there would be trials and hardships, setbacks and sacrifices. But they also knew that they would face them together, side by side, hand in hand. For they were bound now by something far stronger than the shackles of slavery or the chains of fate. They were bound by love, by hope, by the unshakable conviction that together they could face anything the universe might throw at them. And so, as the world around them slowly healed, as a new dawn rose over a planet forever changed, Ethan and Zara stood tall and proud, ready to embrace the future they had fought so hard to create. It was a future of infinite possibility, of untold wonders waiting to be discovered. A future where the strength of the human spirit, combined with the boundless potential of the stars, promised a destiny beyond anything they had ever dared to dream. Hand in hand, heart to heart, they stepped forward into that bright tomorrow. The mechanic and the alien, the heroes of Earth. Ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Ready to build a new world, a better world. Together. And as they walked into the light of that new dawn, a sense of peace settled over them. A peace born of struggle and sacrifice, of love and loss, and the unbreakable bonds of the human heart. They had come so far, these two unlikely heroes. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, had stared into the face of annihilation and refused to blink. And now, as they stood on the threshold of a new beginning, they knew that their greatest adventures still lay ahead. Adventures of discovery and wonder, of love and laughter and the building of dreams. The universe was vast and filled with untold dangers, but it was also filled with hope, with the promise of a future brighter than any they had ever known. And together, side by side, Ethan and Zara knew that they were ready to meet that future head-on, ready to explore, to learn, to grow, ready to stand as the guardians and pioneers of a new era for humanity. The mechanic and the alien slave, two hearts that beat as one, two souls forged in the fire of the greatest battle the galaxy had ever known. They had found each other across the vast gulf of space and time, and in each other, they had found the strength to change the course of history. Now, as they stepped hand in hand into the bright promise of tomorrow, they knew that their story was only beginning. A story of love and hope, of courage and determination. A story that would echo across the stars, inspiring generations yet unborn. The story of Ethan and Zara, the heroes of Earth. And the future that awaited them, glorious and unknown, beckoning them forward into the endless wonders of the cosmos. New beginnings. In the aftermath of the battle, a strange quiet settled over the world. It was the silence of a planet catching its breath, of a people coming to terms with how close they had come to the brink of destruction. Amidst the rubble and the ruin, the survivors began the slow, painful process of rebuilding. Cities that had been reduced to ash and memory rose again from their foundations, brick by brick, beam by beam. Fields that had been scorched and seared by the fury of alien weapons slowly regained their verdant hue, nourished by the indomitable spirit of those who tended them. And at the forefront of it all, leading by example and inspiration, were Ethan and Zara. In the days and weeks following the invasion, they became symbols of hope and resilience for a battered but unbroken world. Their story spread like wildfire, the tale of the small-town mechanic and the escaped alien slave who had stood against an empire and emerged victorious. They were hailed as heroes, as saviors, their names spoken with reverence and awe in every corner of the globe. But for Ethan and Zara, the true reward was something far more profound, far more personal. It was in the quiet moments they shared, stolen instants of peace amidst the chaos of reconstruction. It was in the way they held each other, the way they looked into each other's eyes and saw reflected there a love that had been forged in the crucible of war, tempered by loss and sacrifice and the unbreakable bond of shared purpose. They had come so far, these two unlikely companions. From the depths of despair and isolation, they had found in each other a reason to fight, to hope, to believe in a future they had once thought impossible. And now, as they stood hand in hand amidst the ruins of the world they had saved, they knew that their journey was only beginning. There was still so much to do, so many challenges to face. The threat of Emperor Xolfan's return loomed ever-present on the horizon, a shadow that threatened to engulf all they had fought so hard to protect. But they were ready to meet whatever trials lay ahead, to stand as the shield and sword of a world united, and they would not stand alone. All across the planet, a new spirit was taking hold, a spirit of unity, of common purpose. The old divisions that had once seemed so insurmountable, nation against nation, race against race, creed against creed, began to crumble in the face of a threat that recognized no borders, no boundaries. Governments that had once viewed each other with suspicion and hostility now worked hand in hand, sharing resources and knowledge, united in their determination to defend their common home. Scientists and engineers from 100 different disciplines pooled their expertise, working feverishly to unravel the secrets of the alien technology that had nearly been their undoing. And at the grassroots level, a new sense of community was taking root. Neighbors who had once been strangers became friends, bound together by the shared trauma of invasion and the fierce pride of survival. In towns and cities across the world, people came together to rebuild, to support each other, to forge a new future from the ashes of the old. It was a future that Ethan and Zara knew they would play a vital role in shaping, for they had been given a gift, a chance to make a difference on a scale they had never dared to imagine. They threw themselves into the work with a passion and dedication that inspired all those around them. Zara shared her knowledge freely, working with Earth's scientists to develop new technologies, new defenses against the threats that lurked among the stars. Ethan became a leader in the newly formed Global Defense Initiative, his natural charisma and hard-earned wisdom guiding the way as humanity prepared itself for the battles to come. But even with all their skill, all their courage, it wasn't enough. The invaders kept coming, wave after relentless wave, pushing them back, grinding them down. One by one, Ethan saw his friends fall, saw the defenses they had worked so hard to create crumble under the onslaught. And yet, even in the face of certain defeat, they did not falter. They fought on, driven by a fire that burned brighter than the weapons arrayed against them, a determination that no force in the universe could quench. In that moment, as he stood shoulder to shoulder with Zara, his weapon blazing in his hands, Ethan felt a strange sense of peace descend over him. This was where he was meant to be. This was what he had been born to do. To stand, to fight, to protect. To be a light in the darkness, a beacon of hope in the face of overwhelming odds. And so he fought, and kept fighting, even as the world burned around him. Even as the invaders pressed in, as their victory seemed all but assured. He fought for his home, for his people, for the woman beside him who had shown him what true strength, true courage, really looked like. In the end, it was Zora who turned the tide. In a final, desperate gambit, she managed to infiltrate one of the command ships, using her intimate knowledge of their systems to sow chaos and confusion among the enemy ranks. It was a small thing, a tiny crack in the armor of the seemingly invincible foe. But it was enough. Enough to give the resistance a foothold, to buy precious time for reinforcements to arrive. And arrive they did, summoned by the desperate calls for aid that had been sent out in the battle's early hours. Ships from a dozen different worlds, species united by the common threat, descended on the beleaguered planet, and with their arrival, the tide began to turn. It was a long, bloody fight, a battle that raged across continents and spanned days. But in the end, against all odds, they prevailed. The invaders were driven back, their ships shattered and burning in the skies above. The people of Earth, bloodied but unbroken, stood victorious among the ruins of their cities. And at the heart of it all, Ethan and Zara stood side by side, their armor scorched and dented, their weapons drained of power. But in their eyes a light shone, the light of triumph, of a bond forged in the crucible of war, of a love that had been tested in the fires of the greatest battle the universe had ever known. They had won. Against all odds, against all expectation, they had faced the full might of Emperor Xolthan's legions and emerged victorious. The people of Earth were safe, their freedom secured. But even as the cheers of victory echoed across the globe, Ethan and Zara knew that this was only the beginning. The Emperor would not take this defeat lightly. He would return with an even greater force, an even more terrible resolve. But they would be ready. They, and all the other unlikely heroes who had stood with them in Earth's darkest hour, they would stand and they would fight. For their world, for each other. For the chance at a future they had won with blood and fire and unwavering courage. A new chapter was beginning, a story of rebuilding and preparation, of forging alliances and planning for the battles yet to come. And at the center of it all, two hearts beat as one, the mechanic and the alien slave, the lovers and comrades in arms. Together, they would face whatever the future held. Together, they would stand against the darkness, a beacon of hope and defiance in a universe consumed by war. For they knew, now more than ever, that the true strength of humanity lay not in the weapons they wielded or the ships they flew. It lay in their hearts, in their unbreakable spirit, in their refusal to ever submit or surrender. It lay in the bonds they forged, the love they shared, the dreams they dared to dream in the face of annihilation. And with that knowledge, that unshakable faith, they stood ready to face the challenges ahead, ready to fight, to endure, to triumph. Ready to stand, now and always, as the guardians and champions of a world they had made their own.